I love how David gets so angry about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, is he just an animal lover? But, he understands that there's something that is precious to this person who has nothing.
Yeah.
And it's taken from them kind of at the whim to be discarded by the person who has everything.
And Nathan is pretty smart, and he didn't just come right and say, hey, David, you sinned. Like, he's kind of backdooring it here. He's like, hey, David, question for you. So let's say a guy, let's say this happened, and then David burns with egg. Welcome back to the Physics of Faith podcast. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Tim.
And we are continuing in the life of David, and we are in, I think this is our 10th week of doing this, I think.
It feels like it.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that when we started. I think we're gonna have 13 total. I know we originally this is some backstage stuff for the folks listening. I think we originally had 12 weeks. We actually did this episode we're actually talking about now. We actually decided to add kind of at the last minute, so I think that's 13. So I think we have 4 more after this. So yeah, I think week 10, but nonetheless.
After 6, they all just put it
yeah. So obviously, going through the life of David, obviously not necessarily going chapter by chapter, but kind of going through just certain events in his life, the highlights and the lowlights, as we will say. Obviously David's. There's a lot more that we could do in David's life, so we have skipped over some things, but kind of getting closer to the end here. And so in our last episode, that was one of the big lowlights of David's life, and where his affair with Bathsheba and the subsequent response to that, and covering that up with making sure that her husband Uriah was put on the front lines and that he was killed, and then he eventually took Bathsheba as his wife. And so that's kind of where we left off, and so that's basically where we are going to pick up right up there. And actually, originally when we planned this out, I didn't have this in our original work of things, but we talked about it's like we probably should talk about his response to that and his repentance of that. So because we laid it on him pretty hard last time.
Yeah.
So I think that he deserves a chance to have some good stuff to say about him and his response to it.
Yeah, well, we have said a lot of good things about David as well, but I think this is one of those things that what he did in chapter 11 is pretty horrendous.
Yeah.
And in normal everyday life should land anyone in prison.
Right.
Right. This is a war crime essentially, and it's not good. It's not good, but he's still the man after God's own heart. So how does that work?
Yeah.
And I think this chapter really brings that out for us about kind of how David responds.
Yeah.
Shows how he deals with being confronted with his sin.
Well, and I think that this brings up the perfect, we see this unfortunately all the time in modern day society with very, very good people. Like, and I'm not talking about high ranking people like politicians, or obviously that happens, but even some of the most well known pastors who have done wonderful things and have built great churches and have preached a ton of great things.
Yeah.
And they've messed up in one way or another, and I'm not going to go down and name any names or go down any roads, because obviously you could think of those folks, but those things happen, and then everything piles on. It's like, oh well, he's completely ruined his life, and but God doesn't work like that. Like, we're all sinful, broken people, and we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
Yeah,
and while there is consequences for our decisions, there's also redemption, and there is nothing outside that God will not forgive.
Absolutely. And we do live in a much different time now where things are a little bit different. So when David, because I wouldn't categorize David's blunders as a mistake.
Right.
Right. He does some pretty awful things here, but he's the king of Israel.
Yeah.
So it's very, I don't know, there's a lot of practicalities that are going to come along with that. And God has a lot of purpose for how he can use that and what he wants to do. And when we talk about like a modern day televangelist, and I mean that in a positive sense, not necessarily the caricature sense.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
When we talk about them, some of them may make mistakes. Some of them may have egregious actions.
Yeah.
And we know that the Bible tells us that there are consequences for those actions. And so while God may not continue to use them in that ministry, they may not still get to be the king
Right.
of that country, so to speak. But he can still use them wherever he takes them in that repentance. And that's what we need to be focused on and see kind of how should we respond. And, I would hope that none of us find ourselves in David's situation.
Yeah.
This. So that would be step one, is don't put yourself in this scenario.
Yeah. I like to use the term make bad decisions as opposed to mistakes, because a mistake is when you type trouble and it comes out trouble or bubble or something like that.
Any email you've ever sent me.
Yes, or or you get off at the wrong exit or you whatever. Those are mistakes.
Yeah.
Making bad decisions that are egregious sins are not mistakes; they're bad decisions. So so we're picking it up in 2 Samuel chapter 12, and we're going to go through verses 1 through 25 overall, but we will start in verses 1 through 6. The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, "There were 2 men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it and grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who would come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, 'As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity.'" Okay, so first off, it's important to note here, David has a son named Nathan, but this is not that Nathan.
This is not that Nathan.
Different Nathan. It would really be something for David's own son to say, "Hey, you bring this up." So this is a different Nathan. This was Nathan, one of David's a prophet, one of David's trusted advisors.
Yes.
And the Lord sent Nathan to David, and he did this because David. I talked about in the last episode. David does this egregious act. He sleeps with Bathsheba. He has a kid with her. Then he has his wife. Then he has her wife killed. Her husband killed.
Yep.
Sorry. David's not going to confront that on his own.
No.
And so God has to send some body to confront him about it. It's like, hey, if you're not going to deal with this on your own, if you're not going to repent of this, then I'm going to have to send somebody else to confront you about this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, David thinks he's kind of gotten away with it at this point. I've brushed it on the rug. I made it right, so to speak.
Right.
Which obviously he did not.
Right.
But it's kind of like a poorly kept secret. Like it's kind of obvious what's going on here, or at least that David, even in taking in Bathsheba so quickly, it seems like, oh well, I don't want to assume that they can't do math. Do you know what I mean? Like, so she had a baby, but she only came to the palace a month ago. Her husband died 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Where are we at with this?
Right.
Like, and now she's the wife of David.
Yeah.
People can put 2 and 2 together, and not to mention the number of people he had to have enact the plot.
Right. I mean, he didn't go to Bathsheba. She was brought to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are others involved here. He told other people like, "Hey, make sure Uriah is out in front and then pull back." Like, people aren't that stupid.
Right. Right. So it is. Yeah, it is interesting here, and the story is really interesting as well. And I love how David gets so angry about it.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, okay, is he just an animal lover? But he understands that there's something that is precious to this person who has nothing.
Yeah,
and it's taken from them, kind of at the whim, to be discarded by the person who has everything.
Right.
And David is super angry. And when he burns with anger here, he says, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over."
Yeah.
Because he did such a thing and had no pity. If you go to the law in Exodus 22:1,
yep,
it is it is 4 times the value if you like destroy or take or kill somebody's livestock.
Yeah, so Exodus chapter 22, verses 1. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. Yeah. So David is actually right here in a way. Like, yeah, that's you take somebody, because what he's talking about here is, and Nathan is pretty smart, and he didn't just come right and say, hey, David, you sinned. Like, he's kind of backdooring it here. He's like, hey, David, question for you. So let's say a guy, let's say this happened, and then David burns with egg. And so his response to that, well, yeah, the penalty for taking someone's sheep and killing it is paying it back 4 sheep. But the person doesn't have to die because of that. Yeah, that's where David goes over the top. Now, it does say that if the person can't pay that they would be sold into slavery to pay for that. Right. But they still have life, and again, they're literally just paying it back monetarily, fourfold for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Their life is being used to pay for that. And so I think it's interesting that David responds this way, because it's not just, he not only sees the law of it, he sees the justice of it, right? Yeah. So he's in his heart, and maybe he's a bit emotional about it. And I don't know, maybe he's realizing that maybe he relates to that wickedness, and maybe doesn't realize it.
Well, I was just thinking about this I think that we can kind of see some similarities in here too. So I go to a separate Bible study, and basically one of the guys in it, basically his wife was cheating on him. Okay, and basically she gives him a hard time. This guy, basically, make a long story short, his person tells him it's like, hey, there's a beautiful woman over there, look. But he doesn't actually say that, and he looks and he sees like, oh, there's this really beautiful woman. Now, that's not why he was looking to gaze upon her beauty. I say this in Old Testament.
Yeah.
But he wasn't doing it. He was just like, hey, turn around. And his wife sees him, and she gives him a hard time. It's like, hey, how dare you? Look at this other woman, And he's giving her a hard time. It's like, that's not what he was doing. Then he finds out, comes to find out later, that she was cheating on him with other people. And so how often have we seen other people who are guilty of sin feel guilty, and in their guilt go over the top over other things, or those who talk about, persecuting other because of their sin. Oh, this person is guilty of this sin that they need to be punished for this, but they go over the top, and then we come to find out later on because they've been dealing with their own sin. I mean, that's a trope we've seen, and I think that's where David is coming from here partly.
Yeah, I think you absolutely could be right here, but he's clearly moved. Yeah. To the side of the man who lost this little sheep that was precious to him.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also Nathan here is talking about theft. So basically, what he's saying that David guilty of is theft of Bathsheba's wife, and by taking her in, we'll get to that here in a minute. So verses 7 through 10. Then Nathan said to David, "You are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah, and if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own." So, what Nathan is telling him here is, he actually doesn't bring up the whole affair to begin with. Now, it's important. That was still a sin.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's not what he's talking about here. He's saying about, you had this man killed and then took his wife as your own. I mean, he does. He doesn't blatantly say, "Oh, you slept with someone else's wife." He says, "No, you took her, slept with her, then had him killed."
Yeah.
that's why he uses this. There's multiple things in here that we're dealing with, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, we see a lot of things that David did wrong here, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, first he looked.
Right.
It started with a look, you know.
Yep. As it always does.
As it always does. And you know, there's conversation about this in the scripture about, you know, the uncovering of nakedness, right?
Yeah.
It was not for him to look upon this man's wife.
Yeah.
He did not have any right to that. And they use a very possessive term, like very possessive language here.
Yeah.
But whether a modern audience wants to hear that or not, that is appropriate for any marriage.
Yeah.
You know, you belong to your wife belongs to you.
Yeah.
It's reciprocal, right?
Yeah, he never refers to her as Bathsheba. He says the wife of Uriah. You're the wife of Uriah. The wife of Uriah.
Yes. Yeah, she is. And I think this, not only is it important to note that, like, that's why it's theft, is because in spirit she is joined to Uriah.
Yeah.
But it also showcases how David maybe viewed her.
Yeah.
Not as a person.
Yeah.
You know, but as a means to an end. You know,
Right.
You know, I see this beautiful woman. I want to have an experience with her.
Yeah.
Come what may. You know.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Now I do like here that as he's kind of explaining this and having this conversation, I love what God says is, I've given you everything.
Yeah.
Which, like, this is why he's the rich man in the story.
Yeah.
I've given you everything. And I love this line as he says, if it had been too little, I would have given you more.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that if David was unsatisfied, all he needed to do was ask.
Yeah.
What it is to say is you should have found satisfaction because I gave you exactly what you needed.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that we run into when we chase sins, especially these types of sins, is we're looking for something more than what can satisfy us.
Yeah.
We have everything that can satisfy us, but we're looking to something else, and we're trying to go further and not to live within the confines of what God designed for us, that which was healthy for us, that which is healthy for those around us.
Yeah.
Because David's indiscretion doesn't affect just him. Yeah. It affects Bathsheba. It definitely affects Uriah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It affects his military.
Yeah.
Because he tells the leader of his army to have this man killed.
Yeah.
You know, and Uriah wasn't a slouch.
Yeah.
He wasn't a grunt. You know.
Yeah. I mean, Uriah did nothing wrong. In fact, he was a man of great character. When David tried to cover it up, he's like, hey, have him come back, have him spend the night with his wife. He's like, I'm not going to do that while my men are out fighting and sleeping out in the cold in the desert. Like, I'm the leader here. I'm not supposed to do that. Of course not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, but then as he continues here, he talks about the sword will never depart from your house.
Yeah, so that's where it gets a little. So yeah, we're starting to look ahead here, and as we will uncover in the next few episodes, what that means here. He said, verse 10. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. So that's really interesting laying there. You despised me and took the wife of Uriah. God does not let our sin just kind of brush off. Like, it's like, it's okay. It's never we sin and God's like, it's okay. Like, sinning against others and sinning against God, God looks at that as despising him. You know? I mean, that's pretty harsh stuff. And I mean, I know the things that I say to my own children when they disobey me, you know, and I'm just a broken sinner too. When the perfect God who does everything that we need him to do, who does everything that we need from him, and has given, as you so well put here, is like, I have given you everything you need. If you needed more, I would have given you more, but you didn't. Like, like all of your needs have been met by me. There's no reason for you to be anything less than thankful.
Yeah.
And you disobeyed me in multiple ways.
Yeah.
That is utter contempt of what God has given him.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think it's important to remember too that sometimes I think we think that if I offend Tommy, if I hurt Tommy, that's between me and Tommy.
Yeah.
But no, God's a part of that equation.
Yeah.
Because God made Tommy. God made Tommy in God's image, right? So Uriah and Bathsheba are the image bearers of God.
Yeah.
And David treats Bathsheba like a resource.
Yeah.
Does the same thing to Uriah and has him murdered.
Yeah.
Has him executed. And then on top of that is basically telling God, everything you gave me was not enough.
Yeah.
Everything you gave me, I wanted more. I deserved more. I should have more. I'm not going to be out where I should be, like Uriah said I should be.
Yeah.
I'm going to do all this. So, when we sin, when we hurt someone, we are hurting God. There are no. Gosh, this even extends to this idea that there are sins that are victimless.
You're right.
There is no victimless sin, because even that which hurts us is hurting God.
Yeah.
When you do something to yourself that is out of line with what God's order is, you are doing that to his image.
Yeah.
Right? And that's something important for us to remember. So when David does this, he is sitting in the highest office in God's country where he has set up his people. And this is how he treats the Lord who has delivered them, who has put him in this position. And God is trying to draw this entire people, and you're setting this example. You're doing this, and you're hurting these people.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point that there is no victimless sin. And I think that, this is a little off topic, but I'll go ahead and bring it up anyway because I think it's important to hear, because somebody actually repeated it back to me a while back. Years ago, I was just dealing with some stuff just personally, and I have a really bad habit of like negative self-talk. I often put myself down and it's like, oh my gosh, you're the worst, or whatever. I think the worst of myself. And I remember I was praying, and I remember God was speaking to me. He was telling me, Tommy, you're a pretty good guy, and you don't say stuff about other people. Like, you usually don't talk. I mean, again, I'm not perfect, but I was like, you don't criticize people unfairly. You don't talk bad behind their back. You don't put people down. Because you know that that's wrong. Because you know that they are my son, and they are my child, and they were made in my image, and it's not your point to put them down. Yeah. It's like, you got that, right? I'm like, yeah, I got that. It's like, well, when you criticize yourself, you're criticizing one of my children. Yeah. Because you are one of my children. And I remember thinking that, I went, oh. Because I remember saying this. I was like, yeah, I don't put up, like, yeah, I can put myself down, but, that's me. I have my right to put myself down. It's like, God's like, no. It's like, you're one of my children too. Yeah. So, and I only bring that up because I was having breakfast with somebody a while back, and they brought that up. It's like, so I share that. Not that anything that I do or say is all that impressive, but I know somebody may need to hear that. But yes, there is no victimless sin. You can do wrong other people, but you're also wronging God in the process. You wrong yourself, you're wronging God in the process. Yeah. So verse 10, it says, the sword will never depart from your house. Mm-hmm. Basically, that's some big-time prophecy here, because it's going to get a lot worse for David and his family. And we will see that in the next couple of episodes here. Yeah. So that's... Have you ever thought about doing an episode called Another Podcast for Another Time? Because I know I know that we say that a lot, and I know you and Brandon say that. That's another podcast for another time. One of these days, we need to do an episode called Another Podcast for Another Time, where we talk about all the things
that we put off. Yeah.
Anyway, so okay, so let's continue on in verse 11. We'll read verses 11 through 14. And I've totally lost my place. Okay, here we go. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this in broad daylight before all Israel. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin, but you are not going to die, but because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. So, basically, God kind of tells David, like, all right, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we'll talk. I don't think, if I remember right, I don't think we actually talk about this very exact thing. Mm-hmm. But he says, so the Lord says, out of your own house, before your various, I will take your wives and give them to one who is closest to you.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I don't think we actually read this chapter.
No.
But basically what happens is one of David's sons, Absalom, he rebels against David. Obviously, we will get into that. And he would basically sleep with his concubines. They're considered concubines. And basically, they one of Absalom's advisors like, hey, we'll set up a tent on the roof, and you can have your way with them, basically.
Yeah.
And that's basically what happens, and God tells him like, this is what's going to happen, and that's what happens.
Yeah, that's in 2 Samuel 16, 21 and 22, and it's even noted that this is on the same rooftop from the same terrace that David sees Bathsheba from, right? And so people can see this. People can see what's going on. So it is not only is it from somebody close to him, it's his son.
Yeah.
But it is happening in broad daylight. So the thing that David thought to hide, the shame that he thought to hide, will be returned upon him in broad daylight right there. And then we see too, like, I think when we get down to verse 13, though, I think this is interesting because David doesn't give a lot of words in response to this. And David simply says, I have sinned against the Lord.
Yeah.
And that moment right there, there's no excuse.
Yeah.
There's no, buts. Yeah. There's no, remember when Saul gets confronted by Solomon. Yeah. Or not Solomon, Samuel. And Samuel says, what's going on? This isn't what God told you to do. And he's like, yeah, but the men wanted this. And and we did it for God. Yeah. We rebelled against God for God, It's kind of the Saul. So Saul hits him with all these excuses and it does not go well for Saul. Yeah. Immediately he's like, your life's forfeit. You're going to lose the throne. Everything's going to fall apart for you. Yeah. And right here, David just says, I have sinned against the Lord. David is in full confession here. Yeah. What I did was wrong. I see where I fit in that story, and I have done what is wrong. Yeah. And Nathan responds, look, you're forgiven. Yeah. And you're not going to die. Yeah. But
the story isn't over.
The story's not over.
Yeah.
You have shown contempt for the Lord, and so there will be penalty. Yeah. And more than just what we read here, there's going to be more that I think, or maybe we already read it here, but at any rate, he's basically told him, calamity is going to befall you. You're going to go through these issues. You're going to have rebellion and strife in your household. You're going to have this thing happen with your wives. But then he gets to the bottom of this and he says, the son that's going to be born to you will die. Yeah. Right. And this is actually one of 4 sons that David would eventually lose. Yep. Which is 4 times the penalty. Right. So there's
how that works.
Yeah. So there's, some mathematical justice in this. But not only that, like David didn't just say that it should be 4 times. They should pay 4 times. He also said they should lose their life. Yeah. And David doesn't lose his life, but he loses so much about his own household.
Yeah, and we will see how grief-stricken he will be because of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a great point. I want to back up a little bit. So he says, I have sinned against the Lord. And you said, doesn't say much, but that's the right response. Yeah. Like so often, I can't remember, we were watching the TV, I think we were watching TV a while back, and I can't remember what show it was, but somebody does something and it offends somebody. And Anna says, basically, hey, that's not apologizing. Did you guys see that? Like, that's not apologizing what they did. Like, if you do something and you offend somebody and saying, hey, sorry you got offended. Right. That's not apologizing. Right. That's saying, hey, sorry your reaction was over the top. It's like, no, you should apologize for what you said. Yeah. So who knows what new will have come of this by the time this episode airs, but obviously the big story in sports is Mike Vrabel. and
Oh,
Diana
right.
Rossini.
Right.
And so, for those of you who aren't big sports fans, basically Mike Vrabel, head coach of the New England Patriots, Diana Rossini, she's reported, they're photographed on they're basically having an affair, and they're photographed at this Arizona resort, basically. And these photos come out, and it's like, that's nothing. There was a whole group of us, and basically and then more has come out. More pictures. And obviously it's clearly that's not truth. And so by the time Mike Vrabel goes in front of reporters and has a press conference, he says, I've had hard conversations with my family.
Right.
And it's like, that still hasn't told us, you still haven't confessed anything. I mean,
Right.
And again, he hasn't sinned against, he doesn't necessarily owe the sports world an apology.
Sure.
Sure. He hasn't done it wrong to us. Obviously, that's between him and his wife and his family.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I've read multiple people the reason that this keeps going is because he hasn't said anything about it. He didn't actually like, yeah, we screwed up. He's like, oh yeah, that was first off they covered it. It's like, oh yeah, that was nothing. And then finally the time he actually comes, he says, oh well, we've had some hard conversations. Like, well, what are the hard conversations about? Well, that's between me and my family.
Right. Right. Well, imagine if Nathan comes to David and says that you were that man, and he's like, oh, well, I've had some hard conversations with Bathsheba about this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not confession. That's not repentance.
Also, it's not penance. It's none of those things, right? So, and you see situations like Vrabel's, what he's doing is damage control.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want there to be any consequences in his career.
Right.
While he's behind the scenes trying to prevent any consequences in his marriage,
right.
And so there's a lot there that we can learn from about how to take ownership of when we do wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we said this last episode, the cover up is always worse than the original problem.
Yeah.
I remember somebody said, that's a whole other deal. So, okay, so verses 15. So we'll continue on verses 15 through 23. After Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and spent the nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. On the seventh day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought, while the child was still living, he wouldn't listen to us when we spoke to him. How can we not tell him the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his attendants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground. After he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate. His attendants asked him, why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. He answered, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, and he will not return to me. So David pleads in prayers. He is desperate to heal this child, which is very. And this may be another podcast for another time. We could get way into things like this child that was not expected, that came out of this sinful affair.
Yeah.
He was desperate for this child to live.
Yeah.
First off, that does say a little something about David.
Yeah.
That is like, hey, this is a child and a child of God, and while it didn't come from the right things, I don't want this child to die, And he pleads God, knowing that God has already said this child will not live. This child will be struck down. Knowing God has said to it, and he's pleading and he's begging and he's begging on the floor, and he's begging for this child to live.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at how David handled his affair, he had no problem with Uriah paying with his life to cover up David's sin.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it wasn't his first choice.
Yeah.
He tried to do a couple things, but when it came down to it, I'd rather Uriah die than get caught in adultery.
Yeah.
now here he is, and the penalty essentially for his sin is going to be the death of this innocent child.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's not what I want to see happen.
Yeah.
I don't want this child to die for my sin, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot there, too, to unpack around, because I know there are many who might struggle with these types of verses in the scripture.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's clear here what God did.
Right.
God said, I am going to strike this child down. It says God struck the child.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we don't know how that looked. We don't know what that was. We know the child was sick for 7 days and then passed.
Yeah.
And I know that there are some who will say that you can't call that good.
Mm-hmm.
You can't call God good in that.
Yeah.
And I am somewhat empathetic to that response. I think this is a hard thing to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But David has a better understanding of what's going on here than we do. And I think there's something, Frank Turk says this when people bring this up with him, and he's an apologist. He goes to different campuses and
super
speaks.
Smart guy, great
super
guy.
smart.
Yeah.
People will bring this kind of stuff up with him, and he'll say, he'll ask, can God murder?
Yeah.
Like, God is the judge of all things.
Right.
So God doesn't murder people.
Mm-hmm.
And if life is eternal, he's not killing them. He's bringing them to a different location.
I think
right?
that's a really important thing to note.
Right. Now, we know that in this sense, I think all of us would have the sense that where is this child going?
Yeah.
He's going to the side of God. God has taken him to where he is. The thing that the reason why I think people who struggle with God and struggle with this verse is they want to be able to make the same call.
Yeah.
They want to be able to, and we would say, play God in these types of scenarios, but we do not get to make those judgments. And God forbids us from punishing somebody for the sins of their father.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, we have to understand that God operates at a different level of justice and a different level of grace than we do.
Right.
We can only operate under the parameters he gives us in our brokenness and in our elements. But in moments like this, we have to do what David did, which is worship God.
Yeah.
God is sovereign and he knows what the truth is.
Yeah.
I really still appreciate what David does here because he does kind of come out and say, like, I'm going to intercede. I'm going to pray. I'm going to try to make this right.
Yeah.
But he knows when it's over, okay.
Yeah.
God is still God. God is still worthy of worship. God is still worthy of devotion. I am going to go worship. I'm going to eat, and we're going to go back to running the kingdom.
Yeah, I think the something that we say all the time, like, God is fair, and punishment for sin isn't always pretty, but sin isn't pretty,
No.
And this is how seriously God takes our sin. Like, when we disobey God, stuff happens, and we are punished for it. And this was part of it, And so we can say that the child is an innocent victim here, and it is, but it's also not a victim in that it left Earth and is now in heaven with God.
Yeah.
And that's why David has this peace that he's like, I'm going to see it again.
Right. He's not God's victim. He's sin's victim.
Yes.
And I think that's a good distinction for us.
Yeah. Life is only God's to create. We cannot create human life. I mean, we can do the things that make life, but God ordains that, right? God decides when life is first created. Mm-hmm. And it is it is up to God to take that life because we're all his anyway.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that can be challenging as well when we talk about God taking life. And I'll say that my family went through some pretty serious grief over the last couple months, and one of the things that I thought about in a tragic passing was we may want to blame God for the passing. We may want to blame God for quote unquote taking someone away.
Right.
if we are to do that, we must first recognize that he gave them to us to begin with.
Yeah.
Right? And so everything that you're grieving is the loss of the goodness that he first gave you.
Yeah.
So if God took, then God surely gave.
Well, and here's the thing. Yeah, as much as this stinks, this child never would have been conceived if David hadn't sinned against God in the first place.
Sure.
You know? And that's where it all began. But yes, you're spot on there. And so yeah, in David, and this is why I think this is where Christianity really becomes so much better than non-Christianity, because we can have peace in death.
Yeah.
We can worship God and know I will see it again. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if this was somebody who didn't know God, they would have been. I mean, his attendants were so worried, like, oh my gosh, if he's been so this with the child alive, what's going to happen if he finds out he's dead? And David, who's a man after God's own heart, who loves God, who's imperfect, he goes, okay, well,
Yeah.
God's still sovereign, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so finishing up in
One last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned this, like in our worldview, like there is hope in this. I think it's just interesting to point out. In an atheistic worldview, none of this would matter.
Yeah,
None of it's good or bad. It just simply happens.
yeah,
So like we first have to recognize God's sovereignty
Yeah.
to make a moral judgment about everything that has happened. So
Yeah.
anyway, we can
yeah.
continue.
No, for sure. So just finishing up verses 24 and 25. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. So this is a perfect example of God taking something that is bad,
Yeah.
that is wrong, that is outside of his will, and making something good out of it.
Yeah.
Because Solomon would go on to be, I mean, we're kind of giving away the ending here, but Solomon would go on to become king of Israel after David.
Yeah.
And not only would Solomon be king, he would be incredibly wise. He was known as the wisest man ever. He was also one of the richest men ever. He wrote a couple books in the Bible. Solomon was a great man.
Yeah.
He was imperfect just like David.
Yeah.
You know, he messed up, but this is God taking something that is not good, that is because of our broken, sinly nature, and
Yeah.
making something good out of it.
There's a level of restoration that is happening in this too, right?
Yeah.
You know, he's taking, and I want to point this out. In verse 24, it says, Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her.
Yeah.
Right. And then they had this son named Solomon, and the Lord loved Solomon, right?
Yeah.
What's different here? You already mentioned it.
Yeah.
They call her Bathsheba,
Yeah.
the wife of David.
Right.
After the repentance, after the judgment, there is now still a marriage covenant
Yeah.
that is honored, and now there is a legitimate child in that marriage covenant.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Bathsheba as Bathsheba, the wife of David, not just the unnamed wife of Uriah,
Yeah.
right? She now has agency. She now is in a different status, and God is blessing a covenant that's being played out the way it was intended to be played out
Yeah.
from the beginning. And he's doing it from the ashes of a broken covenant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and I think that this, you know, I mean, this is important to know that, again, God takes sin and makes good out of it. I think that's as simple as I can make it, and I think that's the important thing that we have to remember, for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, we're not going to continue reading this chapter, but if
Yeah.
you do read on, you see a restoration of David as well. Because this whole issue starts because David was sitting at home when he should have been at war.
Yeah, I mean, let's think about it. All of our decisions have consequences, even the littlest. And yeah, as you mentioned, all of this started. You go all the way back. You know, you had, this child dies. Why did this child die? Because it was conceived out of wedlock. Why was it conceived out of wedlock? Because David was looking at somebody that he shouldn't have. And then it's died because David killed the man who's the rightful husband of this woman. Why did he sleep with this woman? Because he was gazing at her when he shouldn't have. Why was he gazing at her when he should have? Because when he was at home when he should have been at war with his troops.
Right. Absolutely.
That was the major decision, and all of this came out of it.
It starts with one choice of what seems like, you know what? I don't need to do that.
And all this bad comes out of it, and all of the bad things that the humans do comes out of it, and then God makes something good out of it.
Right. And while this is all happening, Joab is out fighting the Ammonites. And so when this kind of resolves, Joab sends word, hey, we got him on the run.
Yeah.
King David, please muster the troops. What does David do? He musters the troops, leads them into battle, and they rout the Ammonites.
Yep, for sure.
Like, this war probably could have been over.
Right. Yeah, because as we know, anytime David goes to war in battles, like, boom, 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 it's over quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that is that kind of ends that part of the story of David. We will continue. We're going to skip ahead a couple chapters before in our next story, and we'll start to see kind of why the sword would not leave the house of David.
Exactly.
So this is the Physics of Faith podcast, and we'll see you next week.
See you then.